So now we're on the top of Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. So what's the logic of Rabbi Yochanan that a bas ger amoni shenasa bas Yisrael, where there was biasa ba'avera, she's still kshera l'kuhuna? And here's where we get into some of those very picayune drushes over here, very minutia. The Tani Rabbi Zakkai Kami Rabbi Yochanan. Now, just to give you a little heads up here, Rabbi Zakkai quoted a brisa in front of Rabbi Yochanan, and the whole thrust of Asugya is to reject this brisa. What did it say in the brisa? The brisa says that with regard to Kohen Gadol, the Torah says, Ki im besula me'amav yikach isha, which means that a Kohen Gadol must marry a besula. But the word me'amav is a little bit, shall I say, too many letters on two different counts. First of all, the mem of me'amav. And second of all, the vav at the end of this word is also redundant. So the brisa quoted by Rav Zakkai says that lahavi giores mikana. So we're talking about a bas whose mother and father came from the same nation. Notice they were gerim, and mikano, which means like biyasod, a basis, means that there was a marriage of two people from the same nation, both of whom converted. And this bas, if she's a basula, is allowed to marry even the Kohen Gadol. So let's say, for example, a bas ger amoni, her father was a ger amoni, and who is her mother? Who is her father married to, the ger amoni? Nasa Amonis. She was a Gioris Amonis. And they're allowed to marry each other. Shehik Sheir Lakuna. And this brisa is excluding the case of a Bas Ger Amoni who married a Bas Yisrael. Why? Because then the two parents of this girl are from two different nations. And if they're from two different nations, and we have what's called bi'asa ba'avera, because he had no legitimate right, this ger amoni, to marry a Bas Yisrael, is the daughter is psula mikahuna. Amalei, Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Rabbi Zakkai and his brisa. And why? Shani shona amav me'amav. I'm going to dash in the extra mem. Right? It could have just said in the pasuk, Ki im besula amav yikach. What's me'amav? So the me'amav is mashma that it's not completely amav, but it's mixas amav. So we're looking for a case. This is so wild. I mean, this is what you call cutting with a sharp razor. We're looking for a case of a woman who's born, a bas who's born to two parents who are gerim. Now watch this. What is the relationship between the father and the mother of this bas? On the one hand, they belong to the same nation, the mother and the father, right? On the other hand, it's me'amav. They're really from two different nations. How could you have, at the same time, this mixas amav, which means that they're from two different nations, not totally from the same nation, but yet they really belong to one nation? How do you get that? Lahavi bisula haba'a mishnei amin. So that her parents are like two different nations. And that's the chiddush of Mea Amov. It's only Mixas Amov. So it doesn't have to be the way the Brisa Reb Zakkai had it, that both parents are from the same nation, to the exclusion of a Bas Ger Amon Shenosa Yisrael, Bas Yisrael. Lahavi HaBisula Ba Mishnei Amin. So now Shnei Amin is now included in this halacha of Yikach, of who the Kohen Gadol is allowed to marry. And what is Shnei Amin? Oh, so that's what the Gemara is going to ask now. What's Shnei Amin? But V'ad Amrit, Giores Mikana V'sulo. That Dafka, the Bas is only Kshera if both her parents, Gerim, were from the same nation. So my Shnei Amin, what is Rabbi Yochanan referring to when he's matir the daughter whose parents are Gerim from two different Amim? Again, assuming the daughter is a Besula, she's allowed to marry the Kohen Gadol. Lema, if you're going to tell me, Amoni Shenos Amonis. Now, why is that called Shnei Amin? My Mishnei Amin, Dizchar Masurim and the Kavas Mutaris. The Torah said that the Zachar of an Amoni is not allowed to come into Kal Yisrael, but the Nekeva is allowed to come to Kal. So that makes them like two Amin. So even though they're both from Ammon, but he and she are considered as if they're from two different nations. And Rabbi Yochanan is deriving from the Mei Amov that even in the case of two nations, the child is Ksheru Lakuna. So the Gemara answers, Hainu Gioris Mikana, that would not in any way reject Rabbi Zakkai and his Brisa, because even Rabbi Zakkai would be Machshir in the case where both parents of Gerim are from Ammon. He's an Ammoni and she's an Ammonis. And Rabbi Yochanan came to be Machshir, a case where Rabbi Zakkai said it's possible. Ella, but therefore by proselytization we have to assume that what was Rabbi Yochanan coming to be Mate? Beis Amamin Bi'amoni Shenosa Bas Yisrael. That's Mamish Shnei. And not only that, it's Biyosem Ba'Vera, because an Ammoni, even after Gerus, is not allowed to marry Bas Yisrael. And yet the Bas of this illegitimate marriage is Ksheira L'Kahuna. And that's derived from the special ribui of the Mem of Me'amah. This is the source from which Rabbi Yochanan derives the conclusion that the daughter of a Ger Ammoni who's married to a Bas Yisrael is Ksheira L'Kahuna. The Ika Diamri. Now we have a slightly different transmission of Rabbi Yochanan's statement that an Ammoni who marries a Bas Yisrael is the Bas is Ksheira L'Kahuna, but we don't need a diuk. It's pretty much explicit. Amar Le, Rabbi Yochanan says to Rabbi Zakkai, Ani Shoneh, I have Amav Me'amav, meaning I'm going to darshan the extra mem of the word Me'amav to include Miktas Me'amav, and Miktas Me'am Achelavi B'sula B'mishnei Amin, that her parents, the Gerim, came from two different nations. Okay, but now two different nations could include an Ammon with an Ammoni, because we said the Zachar and the Keva makes it into two Amin, but now he has another drush. Not only a ribui from the Mem of Mei Amav, but also from the Vav, because it could have said, or from the Yud, I should say, it could have said Amma. Why did it say Amma? And I'm going to darshan that the Av is Me'am Sheyesh Bo Shnei Amin. The father is the Ger Ammoni who comes from two different Amim, like we said, the difference between a Zocher and a Keva. And the extra yud of the word Amo, we could have said Amo is coming to be Marbe, the case where the father of this girl was a Ger Ammoni, but the mother was a Yisrael. And she, the daughter of this marriage, even though the marriage was Avera, is Ksheira L'Kahuna. Fiat and you, Rabbi Zakkai Amrit, you said that Gioris Mikana, that it's only a case where both parents are from Ammon, Ammonium of Ammonis, Vesulo. But if the mother was from Yisrael, then the child will be Psula Lakuna. And now Rabbi Yochanan is saying explicitly that an Ammoni who marries a Bas Yisrael, the Bas is Ksheira Lakuna. But wait a second. We have a little bit of a problem here, because if you go back to the Brisa at the bottom of Daf Ayin Zayin, Amud Aleph, Rabbi Yochanan was quoted as saying that a Bas Mitzri Sheni, who's married to a Bas Yisrael, is the daughter of that marriage's Ksheira L'Kahuna. Ulahach Lishna, Bas Mitzri Sheni, right? So the Mitzri Sheni married a Bas Yisrael, which is an illegitimate marriage. Ksheira L'Kahuna, the Bas nevertheless is Ksheira L'Kahuna, is Minolet. How does he know that? V'chitei the Yolif mi'amoni shenasa Bas Yisrael, mala amoni shenasa Bas Yisrael shekain nekevos mutaros. Right? The Torah never included the nekevos of Ammon in the Iser of Kol. Masha Enkin and Kachis, in the case of Mitri, the first three generations of Mitzrayim are Osur, and the Torah didn't differentiate between male and female. The Gemara answers, Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Mitzri Shnia Yochia. Right? The child of such a marriage is Mutal of Lakal. So again, even though in Mitzrayim we don't have a kula of Nekevos Mutaros, nevertheless, if a Mitzri Sheni marries a Mitzri Shnia, the daughter is Mutaris, is Ksheira L'Kahuna. And therefore, even in the case of Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Bas Yisrael, the daughter from that marriage should be Ksheira L'Kahuna because she's a Mitzri Shlishis. And the Gemara rejects it. What are you talking about? Mala Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Mitzri Shnia, Shekain Ein Biasa Bavera. Right? A Mitzri Sheni is allowed to marry a Mitzri Shnia, but a Mitzri Sheni is not allowed to marry a Bas Yisrael. So the daughter of a Mitzri Sheni with a Bas Yisrael is certainly Yitzirasa Bavera. The Gemara says, Ammoni Shenasa Bas Yisrael Yochia. Again, we're going to need a tzad shava here. Right? Here's a case of Biasa Bavera, and yet Rabbi Yochanan said the daughter is Ksheira L'Kahuna. And he derives it from the drasha of Amma of Me'ama. So therefore, Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Bas Yisrael, the Bas is also Ksheira L'Kahuna. But you'll reject that, right? By saying there was a kula in Ammon and Moav that the Nekevos are not included in the Iser Bi'alakal. Is v'chazra did. And now we're going to have a tzad shava because the dinim that might cause this halacha of kosher are different. And we have a commonality between, again, even though Mitzri and Ammoni are different, because the Ammoni has the kula that a Mitzri doesn't have of Nashim Mutaros. In the case of a Mitzri, we have a kula she'ein biyasa be'avera. So therefore, we're going to say that the two sibos of Mitzri and Ammoni that bitum Ksheira L'Kahuna on those reasonings are not relevant, but rather we're going to learn from it that a Mitzri and Ammoni are not Barov Kol, and yet Bitom Ksher Laguna. And if I could bring Mitzri Sheni Shenosa Bas Yisrael, and again it's Eino Barov Kol, and the Bas is Ksher Laguna. Rav Yosef Hainu Dishamina Leila Rabbi Yehuda. This is what we heard from Rabbi Yehuda, the Omar Amov Me'amov. V'lo Yadanamai Ka'omar. Notice we never understood exactly what Rabbi Yehuda had in mind. What did he darshan from Amov and Me'amov? But now that we heard Rabbi Yochanan, who's machshir based on the pasuk Me'amov, a bas of an Ammoni Shenosi Yisrael, Bas Yisrael, now we understand what Rabbi Yehuda had in mind. Now the Gemara brings an opinion to the effect that Rav Zakkai and Rabbi Yochanan were arguing in a different brisa with a slightly different formulation. And we're going to learn from this brisa that the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan with regard to Bas Ger Ammoni Shenosa Bas Yisrael, Ki also Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Amar Hachi Tani. This is the brisa of Rav Zakkai. Kame the Rabbi Yochanan. Isha Ammonis Kshera. So this is based on the drush of Ammoni velo Ammonis. Ubina, and the son of this Ammonis, who is born from a Ger Ammoni, is Posel of Makol. So this is the brisa of Rabbi Zakkai. That means the son of an Ammoni is considered like his father, the Ammoni, and he's excluded from Kol. Ubita, Miger Ammoni, Kshera. What does this mean? We'll have to see. When is the Bas Ksher Ammoni v'Ammoni shenis Gairu? Avol Bito me Ammoni Psula. Omalei, Rabbi Yochanan says to Rabbi Zakkai, Puk Tani Livra, take this Bryson, leave it outside the base medrash. There's a mistake here. And now Rabbi Yochanan explains why this price is a toes. My dika amrit, that which you said, that Isha Ammonis Kshera, that's for sure correct, because of Ammoni velo Ammonis. And that which you said on the other extreme, that B'no me Ammoni Posel, that's also correct. So Ammonihu, right? She's the daughter. He's the son of an Ammoni, so he has the same status as his father. He's Posel level of Kol. But that which you said that a Bita me Ammoni Kshera, Lemai. What did you mean that Bito me Ammoni Kshera? Ilem love of a Kol. If you're telling me that the bas of an Ammoni is Kshera level of Kol, that's not a chiddush, because forget about the fact that the father was a ger. Even if the father wasn't a ger, she's allowed to be miskaya. Hashta ima Kshera, he mi boy, right? If the mother is Kshera level of Kol, because Ammoni v'lo Moavis, Ammonis, is then certainly the bas who's born B'Kedusha is certainly Kshera level of Kol. Ella, but rather certainly the interpretation, the correct interpretation of the Brisa is L'Kahuna. So now we're going to read the Brisa the way Rabbi Yochanan is interpreting the Brisa, the Kahuna. And Bamedvar Mamurim, when do we say she's Kshera L'Kahuna Ba'Ammoni v'Ammonis shenis Gairu? The Bas was Nolda B'Kedusha, what we call Gioris Mikena. Avol Bito me Ammoni Psula, but the daughter of an Ammoni is Psula. My Bito me Ammoni. What do you mean by the daughter of an Ammoni? Ilema Ammoni shenas Ammonis. Then it can't be that the bas is psula because hainu gioris mikana, right? That was a case where both parents and gerim came from the same nation, and we said that according to the Brisa of Reb Zakkai, the child from such a marriage is kshera. Ella, it must be what the Brisa is implying is that Amoni Shanasa Bas Yisrael, they're the daughters psula because the bia was Bavera. And on that, Amar Le, Rabbi Yochanan says to Reb Zakkai, poke Tani Livra, take the Brisa out because it's a mistake. The Mishnah says, Mitzri Vadomi Eino Masurim. Ela Sholosh Doros, Echad Zchor Vechad Nekeves, Reb Shimon Matir Nekeves Miyad, and Reb Shimon came up with a Kal Vachomer. Uma im b'makom she'osar es hazchorin. In the case of Amon Umoav, yet in the Nekevos Amutaros, then in the case of Mitzri and Adomi, which is only 3 Doros, how much more so than the Nekevos should be mutter? And the Chacham responded, "Im Kabbalah hine kablim." If you have a Kabbalah on this one, we can't. But if it's a din mean a logical derivation, then yesh tshuva. My tshuva. What would be the response of the Chachamim to slug up the Kal Vachomer of Rabbi Shimon? Omer Rav Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan mishum deikol meimar rayos yochichu. From Arayos, we have a pircha on the Kal Vachomer. In other words, we're going to have a case where the nekevos are also prohibited. Shelo aser ben elad shlosha doros. So we have what's called bito ubas bito. Right, there's an Erev called Bito, and a granddaughter is also an Erev. But what about a great-granddaughter that's called Bito Shel Bas Bito Mutereslo? Again, I'm not going into Shnios Larais, but as far as the Dorais is concerned, a man is allowed to marry his great-granddaughter. So in Arayas, it's only Ad Shlosha Doros, till the granddaughter, but not the great-granddaughter. And Echad Zcharim, Echad Nekevos. Right, so we're not talking about the daughter of his son, but the daughter of his daughter. So you see that there's an equation here between Nekevos and Zcharim. And we're going to derive from that principle in Arayos, the din of Mitzri Vadomi, that they're assuming that the Isur is also limited to 3 Toros, but we're going to include both the Nekevos and the Zcharim. And now the Gemara rejects this. Mala Rayos Shekain Kares. Maybe the reason why the Torah prohibits even Nekevos like Bas Bito is because we're dealing with an Isur Kares. But Mitzri Vadomi, which is only a Chi of Essay, we cannot derive from our Rayos. So Gemara answers, wait a minute, Mamzer Yochiach, it doesn't have an Isur Kares. And nevertheless, whether it's a Mamzer or a Mamzeres, a male or a female, they're Asurim. So the same thing should apply to Mitzri and Adomi, that even though there's no Chi of Kares, nevertheless, the Isur should apply both to the, not only to the Zchar, but also the Nekevos. The Gemara rejects this Mala Mamzer, Shekain and a royal love of a Kol Liolam. But we were looking for a case of Dar Shlishi. Now you're talking about something that's Liolam. So that's why the Torah is machmir and prohibited even a mamzeres, even in a cave. But in Mitzri Vadomi, that after 3 generations they're allowed to enter into the Jewish folk, is then we would say that the Nekevos are not Asuros, like the Zcharim. We'll compare to Amon Umoav. So the Gemara answers Arayos Yochia. Right? In the case of Arayos, we don't have Asurim Lava Lakoli Olam. In fact, Arayos are only also to the Krova. to the Krovim, not to anyone else. And yet the Torah prohibits even the Kevos, like Bas Bito. And therefore, we're going to say that in Mitzri Adomi, likewise, even though there's no Iser Olam, nevertheless, the Torah prohibited even the Nekevos. The Chazar Adin. And you're going to go back and slug it up, right? You're going to say that we cannot derive our conclusion from Arayos because he's a Karis. Then you say we can't derive our conclusion from Mamzer because that's an Isser Olam. Because we have a tzad shava, because the causes of Arayos and Mamzer are not equal. In Mamzer, you're talking about the Chumrah of Shelo Yovel Yolam, B'Kol Yolam, which doesn't apply to Arayos. And in Arayos, you have the Chumrah, the Chiv Karis doesn't apply to Mamzer. But atzad shavishim hem shasurim the echad scharim the echad nekevos. So there's an isur that extends to include the nekevos as well. Afani avi mitzri umitzris sheyu asurim echad scharim the echad nekevos. So the Gemara rejects this. No, it's even though a mamzer is not an isur kares, but he comes from an Isur Kares. His Yitzira was a result of a violation of an Isur Kares. And therefore, we can't conclude anything from Mamzer or from Arayas to the cases of Mitzri and Adomi, because there we're not talking about a Chiv Kares at all. It's a Chiv Esed. So we still don't have an explanation of the tshuva of the Chachamim to slug up the Kavachomer of Pshim. So now the Gemara offers another approach. V'Rabbanan, the Chachamim will hold that there is a tshuva on the Kavachomer. They're going to say that Mechol the Chayve Eseh, Uker Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, right? A Cholol who's born from an illegitimate kahuna marriage is prohibited with an Isser, even if the prohibited marriage is an Isser Aseh, like going Gadol Shenasa Anusa Mafuta, who's not a Basula, and that's a violation of the essay of Ki Im Basula Yikach. And Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov holds, back on Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis, that a Kohen who marries a woman who's Asur La B'Isser Aseh, the Vlad is a Chol, and is Asur to Kahuna. The Chachamim rejected the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and they hold the Vlad is kosher. It means that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that there's a Chol Michavi Lav. The Chacham hold that there's no Chol Michavi Lavim, and the Vlad is kosher. So now we can begin to understand the tshuva of the Rabbanan against Reb Shimon. Arayas Yochichu. Arayas are only also 3 generations like Mitzri and Adomi, and yet the Torah includes Nekevos. Now we're going to say that Mala Arayos is a Chiv Kares, whereas Mitzri and Adomi is not a Chiv Kares. So on that we can offer the following tshuva. Cholol shel chayve eseh yochia she'ein bo kares v'asurim bo zcharim nekevos. Therefore, the same thing should apply to Mitzri v'Adomi. They're also chayve eseh. We should prohibit the nekevos as well. You'll say malachol shekein yitziraso ba'avera. Whereas Mitzri v'Adomi is not Yitzirasa Ba'avera. I apologize, Steve. It's just one of these heavy blots. It's just
okay.
And if I fall behind, I'm in trouble. So I really apologize. So on that, we're going to say Arayos Yochia, because Arayos is not Yitzirasa Ba'avera, his granddaughter, right? And yet in Arayos, we said even Bas Bito means it goes even through the Nekevos. So therefore, even Mitzri Adomi should include even the Nekevos. So you reject the proof from Arayos because Arayos is a Chiv Karetz. Then I'll include Chalal. I'll bring you from Chalal. Chalal is only an Isser Esed. So we're going to go back and forth until we get Tzad Shavim from there. Shehem Asurim v'nesru b'hem echad zcharim b'echad nekeva. So I'm going to bring Mitzri and Adomi, also Asurim echad zcharim echad nekeva from this Tzad Shavim. And in the Mishnah, we have Rabbi Shimon, who argues against the Chachamim. And he says, Lokain. In other words, he never accepts their tshuva, their pircha on the Kal V'chomer. So the Gemara asks, my Loki, why was Reb Shimon? Sorry. What? Why did Reb Shimon reject this Kal V'chomer? I'm sorry, this slug up in the Kal V'chomer. Hachi Kamerlu. This is what Rabbi Shimon would say to the Chacham. L'didilo spiritually to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Your pircha is predicated, is built on the shoulders of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that a chalal is generated by chayvei esed. I never bought into that shita. But l'didchu, the sphere l'chu ki Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. But according to you, you have a pircha because you accepted Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that there's a chalal from chayvei esed. Is therefore halacha ani omer. I'm going to have to tell you that my halacha that excludes nikevos from the Isser of Mitzri and Adomi is based on a Kabbalah. I had this Kabbalah, an unbroken tradition. And Tanya, Amrulem Rabbi Shimon, halacha ani omer v'yod mikra misayeni. And I'm going to bring a raya from a mikra, because in Mitzri and Adomi it says Banim asher yivoldulem dar shlishi, Banim v'lo banos. Tana Rabbana, we learned to the Brisa Banim v'lo banos divrei Rabbi Shimon Amar Rabbi Yehuda Hareyu Omer Banim asher yivoldulem dar shlishi yavo lehem v'kal Hashem, and it says asher yivoldu hakasuv tlon b'leida, that anyone who's born from this Isur is prohibited. And that includes even Nikevos. Omer Rabbi Yochanan, and with this we'll conclude, Ilav the Omer Rabbi Yehuda Kosif Tlon Beleda, Lo Matza Yadav, Beragla V'Beis HaMedrash, Kevan the Omer Mar, Kahal Gerim Ikri Kol. All right, so this will leave in Mirza Hashem for tomorrow. Okay, then, so we almost finished Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. Okay, then, so I'll wish you a good day and a happy Lag. Okay, then? So let's just, if you don't mind, we'll go out and come in again.